Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. For today we're talking about some cards related to some interesting meta trends that we've seen recently. We are a few weeks into the format now, and believe it or not, we should have another ban list drop around the end of March, maybe early April. The ban list is actually putting us in quite an interesting situation because the whole Snake Eye Fire King deck is quite new, but it's also so dominant that I think everyone expects it to be hit in some way, shape, or form. But of course, that ban list will affect a ton of other things as well, like what other decks might get hit at the same time, as well as what decks will survive and take over the format afterwards. Let's get started. Alright, so kicking things off, we have Wanted, Seeker of Sinful Spoils. This is of course the card that searches for Diabellstar, and is a part of the Snake Eye engine that has allowed Snake Eyes to be a tier 0 strategy this format. This card is basically a quick play chaos space that doesn't require a discard. You can use it during the draw phase to play around Joel and Lockbird. You can put back Original from the graveyard or banished pile in order to draw a card, and the card is just overall insane. With this card, if you are playing Snake Eye Fire King, you're definitely playing 3 copies of this card in the main board. However, looking at the price trend, we can see that the card has come down in price a lot. The card is relatively new, coming out in Age of Overlord, so it's only a few months old. We can see that it hit a high of about $120 a couple of months ago. Of course, a lot of players looking at the OCG results knew that the card was going to be strong, and then seeing the ban list that we had here in the TCG, effective January 1st, they realized that yeah, Snake Eye is going to be a really strong deck here as well. However, the card has actually done nothing but trend downwards over the last couple of months, and it's now sitting all the way down at $60. I was looking at this card over the weekend. I think Wanteds were at 75 or 80, so this card is definitely shooting down in price rather quickly. Overall though, I think it should be pretty easy to see why this is happening. For one, Wanted should be getting a reprint in the 2024 tins, but even before that, I do think it's certainly possible that we could see it in Rarity Collection 2. We always get a card or two reprinted early, usually an extremely in-demand card that the player base needs. The other thing is that we will definitely see Snake Eyes hit on the upcoming ban list in some way, and I think a lot of players think that that card might be Wanted, given how strong of a card it is. I personally don't think that's going to be the hit. I think it's going to be limiting Snake Eye Ash, but I could definitely see an argument for Wanted being hit as well. I don't know, I'm planning on continuing to play the deck for the next little while, but if you have this card and you aren't intending to use it, you might want to join the masses and offload the card before it falls any further. Next up, we have Low, Prayers of the Voiceless Voice. So with Voiceless Voice, I feel like it's the opposite of the Snake Eye cards. I think that the deck is pretty solid right now. They're definitely able to hold their own against most other decks. It's just that they're not anywhere near the power level of Snake Eyes. However, I do think this means that they'll make it through the next ban list unhit, and I'm expecting that, combined with the new support coming in Legacy of Destruction, will be enough to push Voiceless Voice to be a tier 1 strategy. Naturally, Low should be the first card to see a spike in both price and demand, as a key card for the deck that provides ritual fodder, grants access to barrier, and can summon herself back to the field every single turn. Price-wise though, Low is actually relatively cheap right now. The card is starting to trend downwards. I think that once players saw how cheap most of the other secrets in this set were initially, they all started to panic, and the price of Low had shot up to around $85. However, since then the card has continuously just moved down in price, and it now sits between the $60 and $65 mark. Once the ban list does drop, I expect Low to bounce back up in price, maybe back to the $80 to $85 mark. Phantom Nightmare doesn't have many money cards, it's all in the ultras, and Poplar and Princess have come down a lot in terms of price as well. I think that between all of the messed up pricing in Phantom Nightmare, as well as the expectation that Voiceless Voice will be a top tier deck just a couple of months from now, it is a sign that if you can pick up Low for around $55 or so, that's not a bad price to pay if you were going to consider picking up the deck anyways. Alright, moving on, we have the Black Goat Laughs. This is a card that has seen a ton of hype over the last couple of days. It's actually something that was discussed in the meta report for the OCG over at roadoftheking.com. It describes how this card is used against Tenpai Dragons, cutting off the deck's access to their tuner or level 7 synchro, and basically killing off the whole strategy's chances of OTKing that turn. But also, because it has a graveyard effect, it can be useful there as well, especially in a grind game that's going to last multiple turns. Now here in the TCG, this card was originally just hyped as a tech card in Labyrinth, as something that you could discard with the furniture and get value of right away, but mostly because we hadn't seen it used anywhere else in the OCG either. It's kind of cool that the card is now seeing usage by more strategies as a more general side deck option. Price-wise, this card doesn't have a lot going on yet. It had its usual pre-sale hype, but even then the card wasn't too pricey, coming in at around $20 or so. However, the card is currently sitting at $6 to $7 where it's been for the last couple of months. It is something that I've seen a ton of people asking for online, but there's also a ton of copies on TCG Player right now, and the price seems relatively stable. However, if you don't own a set of this card already, I would try to go and make sure that you guys pick some up as soon as possible. With all of the other cards in Phantom Nightmare being relatively cheap, it wouldn't surprise me to see this card shoot up in price rather quickly. Every single time I opened my phone today and checked on Facebook, I've seen more people wanting to buy a set of this card. If you do have them though, honestly, I'd just hold on to them for now. Personally, I'm expecting these to hit the $10 to $15 mark within the next week or so. On to the next card, we have Albon the Sanctifier Dragon. So as we've talked about recently, the Branded deck has made something of a resurgence in this format. Branded can be a really scary and resilient deck in the hands of the right player, and the deck has a lot of different ways that it can win the game. At my OTS championship this past weekend, I actually ended up playing against 2 different Branded players, and definitely one of the scariest things that I had to fear the whole day was the possibility of being Gimmick Puppet locked. Albon is the enabler there, as it can special summon a monster to each player's side of the field from the graveyard, and it's actually inherently immune to targeting, so you can't hit it with Valor or Infinite Impermanence. So this is one that I think's been actually pretty quiet, but over the last couple of weeks we've seen Albon go from being down at $15 all the way to now being between $25 and $30 per copy. This is a relatively new card from Cyberstorm Access, so it should be reprinted in the 2024 tins, but it's absolutely a key card for one of the stronger, more viable decks this format. I believe that for the most part, this card is just used at 1 if you're looking to build the deck. However, the thing is that with the whole Branded archetype and the Fallen of Albaz lore, the cards have been out for a couple of years now for the most part, so most of the other pieces have been reprinted. When you're looking for something to buy out, there's only so many different things that you can target, and I think Albon was one of the few viable buyout targets that was remaining. I don't think that Branded gets hit on this ban list, so if you're one of those dedicated Branded players, you probably just keep on using the cards, but if you're just sitting on this card for no reason, definitely try to sell it off while the card is being hyped up right now. Alright, so we do have a couple of smaller cards to end off the episode with here. The first one is number 3 Cicada King. So there are actually 2 different cards called number 3. I just found out when I was searching the card here. One of them is one of the Numeron Gate cards. This is the other one. I don't know why they decided to make multiple monsters called number 3 though. Cicada King now is a generic rank 3 option that is used in the Goblin Biker deck. You can detach a material from this card to negate the effect of a monster that activates on the field, and then you make an insect on the field, including itself, either gain 500 defense points or change its battle position. Now this card does seem a bit weaker than something like a Gossip Shadow, since you can't use it to play around Nibiru or other hand traps, but I suppose that if you're playing the deck and you've already Gossip Shadow, this is another solid option that you can make as a part of your end board. I do just want to mention the card because of its price trend over the last month or so. This card has just one printing from Battles of Legend Armageddon, and it was one of the cheaper, bulkier ultra rares at only 50 cents or so. The card hasn't seen an insane price spike or anything like that, but it's now up to around $2 to $3 per copy, so still a very notable bump up. For some reason, this card wasn't reprinted in Battles of Legend Chapter 1, and this card did come out a few years ago, so it's probably a little bit difficult to find. This is the sort of card that's definitely worth digging up out of your holobook if you can find it, especially because Goblin Bikers are starting to get more and more attention with players wanting to try out the deck. Don't expect it to get much more valuable than this, but definitely dig it up out of your bulk. It's a nice extra deck option to have available if you're interested in trying out the strategy. Up next, I do want to mention Sky Striker Mobilized Linkage. This is of course a Sky Striker card, and it is one of the really useful quick play spell cards. Basically, you send a card you control to the graveyard to special summon one of the Sky Striker links from your extra deck to the extra monster zone. So theoretically, this lets you access a link monster even if you don't have access to Ray, Hornet Drones, or Rose, since you can send something like Multi-Roll or a Floodgate. However, this card is also useful as an OTK enabler. It isn't a once per turn card, so you can do something like attack your opponent with Ray, tag into Hayate, attack, activate linkage, send Hayate, summon Kagari, add back the linkage, attack with Kagari, then linkage again into Shizuku and attack once more. So yeah, that is theoretically a lot of damage, and Sky Strikers are that deck that's just getting a crazy amount of support every other set, it feels like, with them being set to get several new support cards in Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge, which is coming out in just a few months. Price-wise, this is something that has moved up within the last week or so. This card has only one printing from back in Magnificent Mavens, which at the time really looked like one of the best sets ever printed, but obviously pales in comparison to something like Rarity Collection. However, whereas most Sky Striker cards have been reprinted several times, Linkage has just the one printing. Because of this, it was sitting anywhere between $2 to $4 for the most of last year, but just recently we've seen it shoot up to around $6 to $7, definitely a result of the support that we should be getting shortly. I don't think that the deck is good anymore. If we had Mystic Mine in the game still, then maybe it would have a chance, but with how fast the game is now, I just don't think that Sky Strikers are really able to do enough that consistently. I actually think we could even see Linkage in either Terminal Revenge itself or Rarity Collection 2, so if you're a really dedicated Striker player, maybe keep a set of this card for yourself, but other than that, it's probably just a better idea to offload the card while it is trending upwards. And finally, we have another fun little side deck card here. It's Deck Lockdown. This card is something of a Floodgate spell card that theoretically should have been good in multiple different formats, but for whatever reason has just never been good enough to see consistent play. So this card lasts for 2 of your opponent's turns, and while it's on the field, neither player can search from the deck, and neither player can special summon monsters directly out of the deck either. Now, in the current format, this card can be really useful against Snake Eye Fire Kings. It shuts down Bonfire, Wanted, Original Sinful Spoils, Ponix, Fire King Island, Ash, and Poplar. I'm sure that there are other cards I've forgotten as well. I feel like this card can function similarly to something like Summon Limit, where it's something that Snake Eye Fire King can add on top of their established board, and then just try to shut off your opponent from being able to do anything into your board, and they're just kind of stuck there. Now, historically, this is something that players have tried hyping up several times over the last few years, but it's actually never seen much mainstream play, and always ends up falling short to just other better side deck options. This card is still actually quite accessible, so I don't think it's something that you need to panic or scramble for. The card just got an ultra rare upgrade in Dual Overload a few years ago, and even though it's the only holo printing of the card, that version is still just between $1 and $2 right now. This card does even have 2 other easily accessible printings, the original rare, and then a common from I think an OTS tournament pack. Each of those should only be $1 each. Now personally, I'm still not sold on this card. It always seems like it should be good, but players end up finding something that's even better. If you do have some extras of this card lying around, I guess just stick them into your trade binder, see if you can convert them into something with a little bit more value. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. I guess it is kind of crazy that we should be having a ban list drop soon. It feels like the format just started, but I guess maybe players will be starting to get tired of seeing so much Snake Eye stuff everywhere. I do think that with really cool decks like Voiceless Voice and Goblin Bikers and Yubel coming, we're in for a really fun latter half of 2024. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.